at tonight's Evenings with Audubon, we are excited to welcome Jackie Sandberg and Paige Pederson from the Dane County Humane Society's Wildlife Center. Tonight we'll learn a bit more about wildlife rehabilitation, including when and how we can best help wild creatures in Wisconsin. Welcome, Jackie and Paige. Jackie's going to get started by talking about the requirements that one needs to become a licensed rehabilitator.
I've had a lot of other training, like what is the biological need for that species? How do we keep them husbandry, treatment after the surgery is, can we do physical therapy? And then what are the criteria for release? So we partner together. They were able to hopefully do all of the medications, treatments, other advanced procedures, and then rehabilitators do all of the other follow-up care. Usually in either a home-based setting or a large center facility like ours. Our facility has protocols, and we also are inspected annually by a DNR liaison who makes sure that we have the proper caging for the animals, the proper spaces, and that we're following all of the procedures that we have in place. And then we also have an advanced rehabilitation sponsor. There's like a, not sure if it's kind of stuck on there, but yeah. So the sponsor is someone who basically trains someone to become a future wildlife rehabilitator. And it's like a mentorship here in Wisconsin, where that advanced level person, who Paige and I are both sponsors here from the state of Wisconsin, we've had at least 2 years of experience with a basic license, and then we're required to have sub-permittees that we're training. So it's really fun. That's how we got into the field and how we've learned. But we also need separate permits to work with birds. United States Fish and Wildlife Service, definitely going to be our other important agency that we report to. And to gain even a license to work with migratory birds, you need 100 hours of experience over the course of a full year to be able to apply. So it really takes a lot of time, experience in the field. And really that's what we have at DCHS with a number of us on staff with these licenses. We do report to both of these agencies. So we get those licenses and we have to tell each of these agencies every single animal that came through the facility, why they came in, where did they come from, what were the circumstances, and then what was the end result? Did you end up releasing them? Was it back where they came from? Was it somewhere else? Did they end up passing away in your care? Like, that's important to know too. How successful are you? So that goes out usually once a year, but sometimes quarterly. So for the DNR, they do require us to report certain species more often. Like if we had bobcat come into the facility, or maybe we had coyote or fox. So some of those more, I guess you could call them dangerous animals or the high profile animals that are mammals, and the DNR asks for a quarterly report. So that's how we're able to operate. It takes a lot of time to get the licenses, and then we operate under the help of a lot of other folks underneath our licenses. See if that will go, maybe. Uh-oh. Oh dear. Okay, there we go. I think. There we go. So at the Wildlife Center, we have a whole bunch of folks that are authorized to work under our licenses. So what that means is that we've got manuals, other training materials that we have made, and we actually have online courses for our volunteers to take and all our interns. I feel like this extra slide here. We have to follow all of the rules that are set up by the DNR and the Fish and Wildlife Service, which there's lots of different rules and regulations put into place that not everybody actually knows about. So for example, you couldn't just decide to take some animals from the Wildlife Center and take them home with you if you weren't sub-permitted to be able to care for them with even a certain distance of your sponsor. So that's a law, state and sometimes federal, that we have to follow. And then we are accountable for all of the volunteers' activities. And it doesn't apply to things outside of the shifts at the Wildlife Center, but even in terms of advice that we give, we don't have folks that are speaking on behalf of wildlife rehabilitation outside of the shifts and having people give advice to family or friends, because legally it has to come from a wildlife rehabilitator. And the law actually only allows for citizens to legally hold on to wildlife for no more than 24 hours. So did anybody know that? Like 24 hours to get an animal to us? Yeah, a few people. It's a really interesting law that's in place, but it's honestly super important for that animal, mostly from the need of getting medical attention very quickly. So if you have an animal with a fractured wing, you're going to hold on to it for a couple of days, you're not really doing that best for that animal because it needs pain meds, it might need antibiotics, it might need something more than most of the general public can actually give. But then if I'm thinking of baby animals like this little crow over here, crows are incredibly intelligent and they're very social species. And if you hung on to that crow for a couple of days, even a week or so, you risk it not knowing that it's a crow. And it's something we'll talk about in some more slides later, but we don't want those birds to grow up thinking that they're people, which is something called imprinting. If we get a baby hatchling crow in, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to get it re-nested with their parents back to their care of them. And if I can't for some reason, we have a network of rehabilitators all throughout Wisconsin where we are talking with each other. And I'm going to find someone else who has a crow, you know, whether it's another baby crow about the same age, maybe it's a foster crow at a facility. That way it can grow up with its own species. So it's so important for especially those that go through a critical period of identifying with their own species, their vocalizations, and so much more. So that's why that law is in place, is the quicker that that animal can get to be with its own species or get medical care, that's why it's in place. And it's not legal to raise or care for wildlife without a license. You also can't disturb the nest of any migratory bird and possess any of their parts, so their eggs, feathers, and nests, which is all part of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, if you've heard of that before. And an interesting and kind of common misconception is that if you are a veterinarian, that you have the authority to work with wildlife. It's not actually true unless you also have a wildlife rehabilitation license. And the reason that that is in place is because not every vet school is going to have, you know, a special species department or have the ability to teach someone how do you do this humeral fracture repair on an eagle. They might come out knowing mostly about dogs, cats, critters, maybe large equine, but not necessarily about the intricacies of all the wild species that we have here. So that's, again, just part of the reason that we have a partnership together as rehabilitators. And funding for wildlife rehabilitation, I wish I could tell you that the county or the federal government or someone gives us funding. No, sadly not. We do have to get all of our licenses through the state agencies and federal, but we are dependent on just donations to operate. And in the state of Wisconsin, just like many others, it's not legal to charge for wildlife services. It's a state-owned resource, which means it's publicly owned, which means we're basically doing it for free. So we do depend on a lot of volunteers, donations from the public, individuals that bring us an animal, and I say, you know, hey, can you chip in 20 bucks for the care of this songbird? And there aren't a lot of paid positions out there to rehabilitate wildlife. We feel very lucky, I think, to be having a job in wildlife. But you know, if you're looking at it from a career perspective, it's not going to be a multi-million-dollar type of job. But we say it's a labor of love because we really do think it's an important, critical piece of our community to be here as rehabilitators. And why is wildlife rehabilitation important? Well, we have a couple of perspectives we talk about. The first is from a social perspective, which is to save the lives of animals who couldn't care for themselves. Any idea how often those birds are going to be fed in the wild by their parents? I don't want to take a guess. I bet we have bird people here.
10 times.
10 times. That's up.
Every few minutes.
Every few minutes. There you go. It's about every 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the species. That's a full-time job if we get those babies in, right? And if something happens to mom, let's say mom gets hit by a car, they're not going to survive without human intervention. And so we are there to handle your orphans where something has happened to the mom or the dad or both parents to where we can't get them back safely. We also help to relieve pain and suffering. We do see a lot of traumatic injuries as wildlife rehabilitators. Sometimes those are very old injuries too. A raptor on the ground with a broken wing, not easy to catch necessarily. So it could take days, it could take weeks until it slows down enough where someone even catches it to bring it to us. Those are the hardest cases for us. And sometimes through even a humane euthanasia, if that's the only thing I can offer to that animal, if it's not repairable or treatable, that is something that I'm helping that animal through, because otherwise it would have died alone in the wild and it would have been really sad and it would have suffered. So probably the hardest part of our jobs for sure. We also are here to train the next generation of rehabilitators. I put a goose on there because that's kind of a cool bandage. We do have to continue learning constantly about how we can effectively treat wildlife, and there's new methods that come out, there's new vets that we might work with. And so even ourselves, we continue learning throughout this whole process. I've been doing it for like 12 years now, Paige almost as much, and we still learn new things every day, I swear. I'll come up with a phone call or something, and I'm like, oh, I have never heard that before. Or, wow, that's a really cool bandaging technique. So we do really enjoy that, especially being folks that have been around and experienced for many years. Like Paige, giving educational presentations about turtle incubation, or us giving a presentation to the Audubon about birds. We really like to spread our wings in the public, pardon the pun, so that we can help educate folks about wild animals. And then we do a lot of community service. We just volunteered to host our National Wildlife Rehabbers Association conference this year. This is just a picture from a couple years ago in St. Louis, but every year it goes somewhere else in the US, and we brought it to Madison just this year, which was really exciting for us. And that's something that we were able to bring together people from the state that might not have otherwise been able to go to the East Coast or West Coast or something. So that was really fun. All right, but then our other perspective is from a scientific one. So we are definitely using wildlife as environmental indicators, meaning that we're tracking things like toxicity and disease. So I could definitely ask if anybody knows any, vital or maybe important or critical diseases that are going around in the news right now, but any wildlife diseases you want to shout out that you know of? Avian influenza. Yep, that's big on the list right now. Any others? There's a lot of different zoonotic diseases out there. Got quite crowded. I should have brought some candy. Well, I put crows up on here. Has anyone heard of West Nile virus, for example? That's another one. We've got things like white nose fungus and bats. There are so many different ones that I could talk about, CWD and ongoing. But really, as rehabilitators, we're the first ones to see sick animals come in, right? You might have an event where some group of animals passes away, a mortality event happens in the public, but it's not as often as us getting that sick animal in. And so we start to see patterns, and sometimes it's all at once. And so if we're helping to report those to the scientific community, to public health, then the better and the quicker that they're able to identify where those are. Even with the avian influenza outbreak, actually, that's been a really big deal. So rehabilitators should be reporting any signs and symptoms right away. We also study population dynamics, changes in natality. So how is that changing from year to year, especially if we're talking climate change? I've read some stuff that maybe birds are starting to nest a little earlier this year. We know that if that changes where they nest and then they don't hatch at the same time that insects, for example, are coming out, they might not have enough food to survive. You got a question? Okay. If you think about it again, you let me know. Okay. We do, yes, and we have to report all of those, and it's really fun to make graphs about what species we get and what their reasons for admission are. And so yes, we have a couple of our staff every year at the end of the year, we kind of make different summaries about what species have come in and why and what our success rates are. It's a really interesting thing to look at all the data. We've been tracking it for a long time, so it's a great question. But then we can also take larger sets of data and say, okay, well, when did our first baby robin get here? Every year for the last 12 years, and that's really going to be great to know, I think, moving forward. We also study species ecology in a rehab setting. So we know what kind of dietary requirements, for example, an animal might need. And then we also monitor those species for DNR and US Fish and Wildlife, which I already mentioned. And then the last thing from a scientific standpoint would be conservation. Rehabilitators in a lot of ways are conservationists. And I say that because if we get even a single individual of a threatened or endangered species in, if I can get that one individual treated and back out to the breeding population, it will be absolutely crucial for their success because they're already in low numbers. So just from a genetic conservation aspect of helping save those species, I think that's a really great reason that rehabilitators should and do exist. All right, so talking about the Wildlife Center real quick. We did become founded as a program in 2002 with 6 of us that are permanent staff with licenses for rehabilitation. We do so much more than just work with animals though, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, you're a wildlife rehabber, that's so cool. It is really cool, but we also do a ton of other stuff like volunteer management and fundraising, soliciting education, a lot of outreach. So it's not just about the day-to-day animal care, it's also keeping a really professional facility, helping to train new people, lots of things. And I mentioned our veterinarians, besides our staff at BCHS, the UW-Madison Special Species Program. We have the wildlife medicine program, which is new as of last year, which has been super exciting for us because fourth year vet students now get the opportunity to work with wildlife. And we have our apprenticeships and seasonal staff, interns, and our volunteers helping us day in and day out. So it's a lot of people involved. And this is what our annual growth is like. So we say over 4,000 a year because we did reach over 4,000 a couple years ago. And then it got a little scary because we were reaching over 4,000. But then COVID happened. So we ended up not taking in as many just because of the COVID. I think that happened to like all of our rehabilitators around the state, where we had to kind of start limiting intake, or intake was limited for us. Like we weren't allowed to rehabilitate bats in the last year and a half or more, which has been very, very sad for us. So that obviously changed our numbers because that would be our biggest program in the winter. There's definitely a growing need for rehab in Wisconsin, but there's not enough of us out there and licensed. We are the only bird rehabilitation center in southwestern Wisconsin, which means that someone in Platteville, 2 hours and a half or more away, is gonna have to drive all the way here to get an owl to us. You might be able to get close to La Crosse, and then otherwise, Lake Geneva, Milwaukee only takes from Milwaukee County, so it's very difficult.
Where are you located?
Here in Madison. Yeah, it's like right the border of McFarland and Madison. Yep, it's like right where the Beltline 1218 crosses Stoughton Road.
So
it's,
where do you go for pets?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, we're just a separate building. We don't keep the wildlife and the domestic animals together. So we have multiple buildings, actually: wildlife, the main shelter with critters, cats and dogs, and then the equine barn for livestock, horses, goats. Yep, so it's really cool, actually. And it helps us a lot. We have about 32 acres on the property, so. All right, anyone want to help us with the top 5 species that we admitted last year? Just birds. I decided to change it this time because this is Audubon. Mourning dove is on the list. It's number 5, though. That's a good job. House finch is also on the list. You got number 4. Someone I heard it say. American robins. It was number 2.
Or chickadees.
You guys are all so close. I'm gonna give it to you. Ducks. Mallard ducklings. And then you get your robins. So we had 296 mallard ducks last year, 197 American robins, and then also if we're going to combine in wood ducks, we have 172 of them. So ducks are kind of our jam, or at least last year for sure it was. And there you go. You guys guessed it, house finch and mourning doves. So that's a lot of our common species, right? You guys probably seeing these in your backyards or around Madison most of the time. But we also have a lot of variety. 152 different species actually came in 2021. So, and those are some mammals too, and some turtles and snakes. But. All right, and then very briefly, before we get into our fun Q&A part, common causes for admission are hit by car, window collisions, dog and cat bites. This is all coming up here, especially in the migration period and the summer with dogs and cats. Neurotic behavior, parasites, emaciation, meaning they're starving, and then dehydration and toxicity. And orphan babies. So there's your cute, fun picture break that I always like to show of all the cute things that are probably, well, already coming in now. We've already had baby fox kits today that got transferred, I think, to a rehabilitator that takes all the fox kits in Wisconsin. So it is baby season officially. And we actually field over 6,000 phone calls a year from the public. Believe it or not, just our center alone does that. And we're always asking, does that animal actually need our help or not? So I always keep this slide up here because it's my favorite. Does anybody think those baby bunnies are orphaned? Show of hands. No, it's not a bird. They're probably the fattest little bunnies I've ever seen in my life. So they are very plump and happy and well fed. So our goal is to actually just treat those that are sick, injured, and truly orphaned. We can't legally even take them in unless we know for sure that they're orphaned. So we assess everybody that does get admitted. We give full exams, blood work, diagnostics, so many different things asking, is this animal a candidate for rehabilitation or not? We do a lot of treatment, which is medication, surgery, wound care, anything that they would need. And every individual is different until they're able to get past that supportive care period, get through the cage rest period, and then they get to move outside eventually when they're strong enough. And they go out to our flight enclosures, which are for conditioning and acclimation. So for a bird that maybe had a wing fracture, they're getting flight conditioning and exercise to bring those muscles back up into good health and working order. And we do lots of staff evaluations to make sure, okay, if they had an ocular injury, is it resolved? Are they able to perch? Can they fly? Can they maneuver? So a lot of different tests that we're doing while we're out there. And then we do release them either right back where they came from, which is usually our choice, or if we get a lot of young babies, like a whole group of robins, we usually release them as a full flock together, somewhere where there's really good habitat. And we definitely released at Audubon locations a few times, which has been very nice. All right, so here's some fun videos to show you what we're actually doing day in and day out. Got the chance to feed some, these are almost weaned grackles this last year. I think I mentioned every 30 minutes. I'm not sure if the sound is working on there, but that's okay. They're usually pretty loud. And then lots of supportive care. Like here's our little gray squirrels. We've got baby gray squirrels that have been coming in just this week. So it's a lot of fluids, getting them back to hydrated status. Lots of exercise. I know I'm showing some cute possum pictures here, but this was my favorite possum. I had to keep this in the slide, but we nicknamed. We don't name them, but we did nickname this one Mr. Big because he's like the biggest possum we've ever admitted. He did this at night. This is a trail camera catching him. We're not doing this in person or anything, but. And practice. This is a cool one. This is a little screech owl. If you can kind of see him on the slide, he's looking down at a tub that's down in the base of his enclosure. It's his first test of, after having an eye injury, can he catch a mouse? That's important for us to know, okay, would he be able to hunt in the wild? If he can't hunt in the wild, how do I know I'm not sending him out to starve? Like, that's a really important part about raptor rehabilitation. So we get to have our live cameras that are in there recording stuff, which has been very helpful for us to track their success. And then of course the best part is freedom. So we're giving those animals a second chance at life. And it's really amazing to be able to do work like this with things like especially bald eagles. I mean, probably one of our favorites because they're very cool to work with, but knowing that they're going to have a long lifespan in the wild and be able to successfully breed again, hopefully, and have more eaglets. It's a pretty fantastic job in that respect. And we do try to track our success after release. So I think Caitlin mentioned that we do band. And it's a great opportunity for us to get some information back about those animals. Right now we ban songbirds and red-tailed hawks, and hopefully we'll be banning more of them over the future years, but it's a great way for us to be able to know how long they survived after rehabilitation and where they went. So if you ever do find a bird with a band on it, I always point this out. You can go to the USGS website for the bird banding laboratory. And definitely, even if you get a partial number or a picture of a partial number, it's really great to be able to report that. All right, so now we get to play a game, and Paige is going to help me out here with this one, which is Ask a Bird Expert in Jeopardy style. So we get to let the audience, whether it's virtual or here, give us a category that they'd like to ask some questions for, or you can also ask your own question if you like, because we're open to as many questions as you'd like for the time that we've got. Birds, birds, birds. Is that normal? Birds aren't people. Reuniting and renesting? No, don't touch that. And hot topics. So if anybody would like to pick one, you can shout it out if you want, or raise a hand maybe, that might be easier. We got one in the front row. For which one? 600. Oh, what kind of birds are these?
They're hares.
Oh my gosh, you are so good. Okay, we gotta keep the picture. Oh, I will repeat the answer. It was herons. Very good job. Green herons and great blue herons. They're gonna get here pretty soon. We definitely had green and great blue herons in wildlife rehab. You want to talk about their nesting at all?
Here. There's a rookery near
Yes.
and they've been here for well over a week or two.
Oh, even better. That's great. I haven't not seen them yet.
So excited.
When I think of here, I mean, when do they come into the wildlife center? Which is very soon. So sorry, my brain is usually on what day do we see them come in? But you're right. We have them. Oh, okay. All right. Yes, that's fine. Yeah, we do have rookeries. The great blue herons will generally live more in larger groups, whereas the green herons tend to be more solitary. But it's definitely a species we get a lot of calls about, where people say, hey, I found this heron at the base of a tree. Does not necessarily mean that it's injured at all. And we've gone to renest some green herons as well, even down in the city, just Madison. I know I did that last year with an intern back up with its siblings crawling around in the nest. So yeah, it's yeah, keep your eye out for herons. Any others? Who else wants to pick a category? This is where I really should have picked candy. Go ahead.
No, don't touch that.
No, don't touch that. So which one?
400.
400. All right. So I've got a caller here. You want to read this one, Paige?
Sure. This is a common one we see. So this caller said, I have a mallard duck and they nested in the potted plant on the front porch of our local bar. And there's 6 eggs in the nest. And mom wasn't there last night or this morning. I think people scared her off and she abandoned the nest. Should I collect them and bring them in? What do you think? Anyone know anything about mallard nesting habits? I'm waiting for this call. Go ahead.
You mentioned not to touch the egg, so I think don't touch them.
Yeah, that is really important. That is very, very true. And then the really interesting. Oh, sure. He said that we mentioned we shouldn't interfere with eggs. So because of the migratory bird treaty, we shouldn't interfere with an active nest. So don't touch those eggs. That's perfect. Mallards are very fun because they will lay an egg a day. And she will walk away after that. And she's not going to incubate those eggs until she's laid them all because she wants them all to hatch on the same day. So usually mallards will have about 12 or so. And so it's not unusual. So we want that nest to stay there in front of that bar. They pick the most interesting places.
By the way, these are all true falls. Yep. I just would like to point that out. Yeah, they were worried that the patrons might start getting really rowdy and noisy and asked if they could move it. So we said move it a few inches down the bar porch, just a little bit at a time. People can put up like fake bushes or barriers in front so people can't see mom sitting on a nest. That sometimes works. But sometimes putting like a sign in front of like, here's a mallard in her nest, don't bother her, that can attract more attention. So we see different things every year. But they like to pick businesses. They like to pick the busiest spots they can. But it works out for them in the end usually. So groups of babies without mom, if they've newly hatched, maybe mom just got startled, flew away, we want to give her a little bit of time to come back. So if you see a group, just keep them where they are and wait and stay away. If they're loose running around, you can box them up and just give an hour, see if mom's going to fly back in. She might have just been startled. If you're finding singles and there aren't any adults around, that's probably a spot where we know they're orphaned. Or if you find them in the sewer, has anyone ever come across that or seen the fun stories? Every year, we will always find some that have been down in the sewer. Usually at that point, mom will have trotted on with her current babies. And so at those babies are orphaned and should go to rehabilitation. And Jackie gave it away at the bottom, but ducklings, they do not wild foster very well. So you shouldn't take a single duckling and just go running after to the next pond in the county over or the lake over, because they won't be accepted very well. Ducks are kind of mean to each other, unfortunately. Anybody have questions about any mallard things? Yes.
Is that true? Is that true for all ducks or just the mallard duck?
Most ducks.
I've heard stories, stories on Facebook and stuff. You know, the duck that has 40 ducklings. You know, she orphaned, she's fostering.
Some will be more amenable than others, and some will be not as nice. So when we're talking the most common that we see, mallard ducks, which is why we have it up here, they are not nice to an individual, even their own, if it's been separated for a long enough time. And if they're not sure that it's theirs, they will also start harassing it, pecking at it, and sometimes flying it off. It doesn't always happen, but largely those cases don't turn out very well. Wood ducks have been known to maybe be a little bit more amenable of taking others. Sometimes it's better if it's done in the nest box, like the day that they're hatching, and then that can work. And I've got some information about geese and stuff. Those are great, but ducks just in general, I would say, maybe mergansers have been known to be a little bit more open to taking other babies as well, especially mixed broods. We have sometimes have mergansers and wood ducks that nest together, for example. Yep.
The photo of the adult with like 80-something.
Yeah.
Oh.
So some species better than others, but.
Caitlin, you have a question?
Yes, we have a question from Facebook. Someone said a couple years ago they found several buried duck eggs in raised garden beds and at their community garden. They've never seen that before and had read that ducks might try to bury their eggs if they sense danger while they're laying, and they were wondering if that's true.
I can't say that I have come across too many of those cases, or many. I think of turtles as being the ones more commonly to bury their eggs because that's just what they naturally do.
I mean, I could see it as a possibility, but normally they'd be lining their nest with like their the downy feathers that they would pluck. So I would say that that usually isn't going to be as apt for them to be underground because the temperature difference, it would be a little bit odd for them because she has to sit on top of them to incubate. So I can't 100% say for certain that that's not true, but I don't think that I've come across it myself.
Yes, I've certainly never heard of it happening before, but that doesn't mean we know everything.
That's true. That is a great question though. So now I'm gonna go home and look that up later and see if I can find any other instances of that.
I wonder, I start to think about someone predating or caching food of another species, perhaps too.
And there are some birds that do similarly with turtles, lay their eggs under a certain soil temperature so that they can hatch at a certain sex. So like if they want more females versus males of their own species, that temperature actually is something by choice that they can do. And I have heard that with certain like galliform species. So maybe odd occurrence, or maybe it wasn't mallard. It could have been also maybe, well, I guess that's hard to know. Any other duck questions? Ducks are coming. We've got them nesting right now. So. All right, who wants to? Oh, nope. I'm not gonna give that one away yet. Oh, all right, wait, maybe we will. All right, we're gonna give this one away. So I guess we're going with don't touch that, category 600.
Does anyone know what species this is? Yeah, he said some type of gull, like a herring or a ring. You are correct. This is a herring gull. And is this an adult or a baby?
Yes.
Yep. He's got this lovely brown color, and you can see these little wispies of down gray on him. So should you find him out on the ground, should you touch him or not? Should you bring him in?
For what reasons would you want to bring him in, if you had to guess?
There's an imminent predator.
All right.
You see a coyote staring.
Okay. I can make a case for either or. The poor coyote also might be really hungry, but I also would care about the gull too. So that is a hard choice. That's a 50-50 there. Any other ideas? Yeah.
Has that bird just fledged?
It sure has just fledged. Yep. This is probably, I don't know, one of my favorite cases at the Wildlife Center. It only happened this last year. I put our Facebook post about it happening this July.
Yes, we saw this gull at least 3 times, but we didn't need to.
Nope.
So he was one of our downtown urban gulls. He fledged off of his roof nest and was right down by the Monona Terrace and the bike paths. So right in the heart of things, where everyone will walk right by him. And so he made the journey, folks picking him up and bringing him over to us with, you know what, this gull looks familiar. Where did you find him? I'm like, oh, sure enough, we already looked at him.
Yep.
So he came in 3 times. We did full exams each time just to make sure.
Yep.
Nothing else had changed. But he was gaining weight every time he came back to us. So he was eating in the wild.
And not even that, we also had an animal service officer go ahead and just confirm visually. She took him back for the final time and said, she messaged us a whole bunch of things. She's like, Jackie, the mom is sitting on the roof watching her baby. Why is this gull coming to you so much? And he's just naive. He's on the ground for a little while. He's being actively fed. Mom is being very attentive. Just so happens that the what we like to call abduction with the intent of rescue is happening by a lot of folks that might not know differently, that they're on the ground for a bit. That's fine. He was very close to the water. Like, he would have been all right. Yes, there are dangers of things like traffic and stuff, but we hope that their parent is protecting them enough at least to help avoid that, but it doesn't mean it'll always be safe, but it's going to be better in the wild for that bird rather than coming to rehabilitation, no matter what the circumstances are, to be honest.
They learn more from their parents in the wild than we can replicate.
And gulls are also a species that, you know, could get too used to us at that age. We don't want to take him away from his parent if she's still there, and it's not a terrific. So no, don't touch that. All right, let's see if I can get back to the actual screen. Oh, geez, my goodness.
Huzzah. Want to pick another category? I really want to see, is that normal? I don't remember what Jackie put on these slides, so.
Someone want to give me a number? Is that 800? Is it normal? All right, let's see. Ooh, one of my favorite photos of which kind of species? Anybody know? Is the screech
Screech
owl.
owl, yep. You got it, eastern screech owl.
Should we take a poll vote? How about yes, the screech owl is normal? Okay, no, this owl is not normal. Okay, looking like we maybe got mostly yeses. And we would agree with you. Leave it alone, it's a brancher. So owls at this age, as they have come out to explore the nest, you can see how well he's clinging onto that tree. He is able to ramp himself back up and climb. He just does a little bit of flapping, and those talons are beautiful for grabbing onto the bark. It just flaps his way right back up to the tree where mom and his other siblings are waiting for him. Just needed a boost maybe, but not always. Barred owl babies are great about like running at trees and just like getting themselves all the way back up if they need to.
So we see a lot of branchers, common species for us, great horned owls, these eastern screech owls, barred owls, like Jackie said. And when they reach this brancher stage, you'll see them, they've fledged out of the nest, but they're not quite truly flighted yet. So they are kind of teenagers, as I like to say it. They're a little gangly, they don't really have everything coordinated yet, but they have really good strength at their feet, and they're flapping their wings quite a bit. And so they're moving like throughout the branches, usually in that nest tree. They're starting to move from tree to tree as they go to the ground. If they're in an urban place, they find the next tree to climb up. So they'll start to move. If you've got a nest in your yard, these are some of the best things. Folks call us all the time, like, oh, my owl moved, where'd it go? Oh, it's just in the tree next to it. But these guys are nice and healthy.
You can see it, you can tell he's a juvenile because of the fuzzy look to him. I mean, the down feathers are still somewhat there. Ear tufts aren't fully in yet. Looks kind of drab and a little bit ugly still until they get their really nice plumage. So anybody experience baby owls on the ground at all ever at their houses? No, you gotta go.
When they've got a rabbit.
Okay, that's true. And yeah, I've had those. We get a lot of calls too about that, you know, the bird that's down on the ground, but if you look closely enough, you might see prey underneath, and they just kind of hang out and usually are with it for a while. Great job, everybody. All right. All right, so let's see. There we go. Any others?
Our virtual audience
Yes.
has selected no, don't touch that for 1,000.
Awesome. Love it. All right. It's my favorite category. No, don't touch that. Why or why not?
I don't even know what species that is.
Great one now.
Great horned owl, is that an adult or a baby?
Adult.
Yep, that's an adult.
Anyone know what's happening to it? Or what it's experiencing?
It's like, it sees you and think, oh, it's gonna hurt me.
Maybe.
It's a good guess, but no,
Not quite.
not quite.
I hear someone else over here that maybe mentioned something. Could be a concussion, definitely. That can cause this type of behavior. We call it nystagmus, but also, well, there's a pupillary light reflex is changing pretty consistently.
So this is a neurological symptom.
Yes. So you can see there's a little bit of a twitching motion too. If you notice the wing kind of spasms a little bit, definitely abnormal, right? So this bird is definitely not okay. Normally we wouldn't recommend a member of the public deciding to go ahead and just grab this owl. Any suggestions as to
Right now,
any of them? Yep. This is that one though.
what'd you say? Yep, definitely has a normal mental state. Something's going on here. And I don't know where you're leading me, this Jackie.
Oh no, it was that. It's the one you're thinking. That is true. But also they're dangerous. So
Oh, dangerous.
yep,
where she's
that's
leading
what I
me.
was thinking.
So for great horned, any of these big raptor species, they have these really great big talons, a lot of pressure in there. So we want to be really cautious if you're coming across an adult, any wild animal, they can be dangerous. So catching these guys, you want to be very safe and not do anything with your bare hands. If you come across an owl like this or another species as an either adult, you want to assume that they can do harm to you just like you can do harm to it by accident. So that's where you want to call your local wildlife regulator. So you can get that advice on how to maybe safely contain or no, that's okay.
There are definitely ways to contain animals like this without actually having to touch them. So I tell people thinking outside the box, meaning like go find a box, and sometimes all you need is something to kind of nudge them into and then flip the box over. So it is really helpful so that you aren't going ahead and grabbing, but that a lot of pressure from a talon, like you could get a very deep puncture and it could be very dangerous for you. You definitely go to your doctor if that ever happens, but they also use their beak in defense. It's not just their talons.
How do you treat something like that, a neurological?
Well, currently we are not because of this, which is a great question. We might if we didn't think that it was something related to a potential outbreak, which was the other part of this slide. And we wanted to have folks, I'm glad someone chose this one because right now the avian influenza outbreak is going throughout the US very prominently. So do you want to chat about this one?
Yeah, so right now we have this outbreak of avian influenza. I'm sure folks have seen that in the news, but it really affects our bird species in Wisconsin. So the high-risk species for avian influenza are these waterfowl, water birds, things that are in the same habitat with these higher-risk species like ducks and geese, and raptors. They tend to scavenge on injured or ill waterfowl, so they can pick that up as well. And our other scavenger species like crows, jays, vultures, gulls, things like that. So what we're seeing, like in that owl, for example, is maybe a classic symptom of this avian influenza outbreak. So we're seeing things like abnormal neurological symptoms. So we've got that head tilt. Sometimes they're circling, or they're flying in circles, or they're stumbling back and forth. There also can be some respiratory symptoms with this disease. So they have ocular discharge or hypersalivation, abnormal respiration. They can also do something simple as they look depressed, or they are lethargic, or they're not able to stand, or they've suddenly died. We found them and they're suddenly dead. But the problem with all of those things is there's also a host of other diseases and problems that might have caused those. So when you ask your question of like, how would we treat something like this? It depends on the season. So right now we're being really cautious about avian influenza. So we elected we're not going to treat that bird because we don't want outbreak in our center and affect our other birds that we were able to. But if we can, we might think, is this head trauma? Is this another disease like West Nile? Is this a throat? Is this a toxicity like lead toxicity? We see a lot of these symptoms are very similar for lead toxicity in like an eagle or any of these other things. Yep.
Could be, yeah, abnormal neurological signs could be so many different things. I think when we see nystagmus, which we noticed the head was kind of going in like a sprinkler action and then the pupils dilating back and forth very rapidly, that's going to be something more indicative of maybe possible head trauma, but right now is a sign and symptom of avian influenza. Because it's high risk and highly pathogenic, just if you haven't heard in the news, which I'm sure a lot of people have already, it is zoonotic to mammals and to people. And so that's why we have to be very, very careful. We're not even keeping our raptors in like same rooms. Like every room that we have is separate, even separate buildings for certain species right now. And that if we see these signs, we don't want to risk the health of any of our personnel, but also, like Paige said, you know, we have other birds that have been rehabilitating for months. And if they all got highly pathogenic avian influenza, then what if they died after multiple months of care and treatment? Like that would be really difficult. Yep.
Is that how old we have it in the?
It's in the list on for testing right now. Yeah, we have, if folks had seen the DNR put out the posting for the avian influenza reports that had been coming back positive in Wisconsin. Yeah, we did help in some of those efforts. So yeah, we know it's here. Hopefully it'll go through quickly, but we want people to be aware of it so that if you're seeing sick animals of these species or down in your yard, you know, abnormally neurologic, don't touch them. Definitely call police or animal services, or again, call us for advice on how to do it without containing it. We would even recommend going as far as maybe wearing, people have masks right now because of the COVID situation. We would highly recommend that if you're gonna go close to a neurologic bird right now.
I would say as well too, I think folks are probably birders here,
yes.
Right? And maybe you have birds at home, like either pets inside, we might have backyard flocks of chickens. If you're going out birding, I would recommend changing your shoes, washing your clothes, maybe even taking your car through the car wash before you come home to your pets, to your backyard chickens, and things like that, just to be extra cautious right now in this hopefully short term.
Yep. All right. Oh, nope. That's on my gosh, I gotta stop doing that.
Does anyone have any questions about avian influenza?
Yes. Otherwise, there's really great information right now on the DNR website. The CDC's got some for people, APHIS, USDA. It's a really big topic right now. So.
The avian make the leap to humans.
It can.
It can. There have been no documented cases in the United States, but we take it seriously. So we're wearing masks at work and wearing gowns and we're working with birds. So.
I think there's been one case in Europe, but it was mild symptoms. And so we know that and certain outbreaks throughout the years have led to some human cases, but
right now they consider it low, but they are monitoring it very carefully because it's still possible. Yes.
Is there a similar place to call regarding this with the feds? We monitor eagle nest.
Yeah.
It happens to be at a federal waterfall
Mm-hmm.
area. So when we saw something there, we see hundreds of birds there.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely call your U.S. Fish and Wildlife Migratory Bird Office, and we do have it regionally, and they do have folks that are out. DNR biologists are all being mobilized also to pick up animals that are neurologic in every county. So like we've been working very closely with them as well.
So we can probably start with DNR.
Yeah, I would say so. If you're in Wisconsin, DNR biologists are already like on those calls at the moment, but Fish and Wildlife would also, especially for an eagle, because there's federal permissions there with the extra, the Bald Eagle and Golden Eagle Act, that would not be a bad thing to report for sure.
They do talk to each other, so that's.
Yes, well, most of the time.
Our eagles go over there, get those birds for lunch.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
Yeah, they have a special asterisk on that, which is especially eagles, because they definitely are scavengers. So they're seeing more evidence of those for sure.
Brennan, your question.
Yeah, has something like this happened in the past? So you have a sense for how quickly it spreads and then dissipates?
Yeah, I think the last outbreak that we were prepared for, it felt like it wasn't as rapid as this one maybe, but 2015, I know we were under quarantine procedures for highly pathic avian influenza. We didn't get any neurological cases, I don't believe, during that year, but it also went through, I think June was when they lifted the quarantine in Wisconsin, I want to say. So it was only a few months, but I have seen other papers suggesting like it could be as long as 18 months. Like you never know really, especially if the spread continues, and then if it's a virus, right? So it can change depending on what species it's hopping to. So that can make it more challenging. It's very similar to the COVID situation, so very applicable if people have been reading about that.
So it might change based on the migration status and as the weather changes. And there's many factors that will come through and how virulent this particular strain is. So
it sounds like it is
for sure.
Yep, and it's very hardy. Like it can stay in the environment quite well. You can't even just freeze the carcass. It will still be detectable. So heat maybe is the only thing I've heard that kills it that high. So we use a lot of disinfectants at work. So. All right, any other fun categories we want to try? Birds are people. Oh, exciting. All right, which one?
Oh, 800.
800, all right. Whoa, this is, so remember, these are all real, by the way, all of these slides, every one of them, it's exciting. I kept everybody anonymous just in case, but. All right, so in this picture, we have 2 cats on a porch, and we have someone who messaged us about this little bird, if you can see, is kind of between the cats. When I got up this morning, this is how I found the bird. I went to the doctor, came home, and the bird in a crate at the dining table. The children fed it canned cat food with a tiny medicine syringe. What's wrong with this scenario? There's a couple of things wrong in this scenario. Yes, the cats outside seem to have found a nice snack. It is a tiny blue jay, by the way. Cats outdoors, I think Audubon has talked about that probably a good amount. We always encourage people to keep their cats indoors, even as a Humane Society. It's something that, we see many injuries due to cats, dogs, other pet companion animals. It's but anywhere from 15 to 30% of our admissions every year are going to come from domestic pets because this little bird cannot fly yet and he's on the ground.
Do you think we should feed that blue jay?
Probably not.
You got it.
Also generally suggest not, keep the kids and pets away usually. As much as we love children very much, sometimes they might see some wildlife, depending on what age, as more of a pet or want to feed it. They want to help. And so it's better to probably keep that animal in a safe, quiet environment, somewhere away from noises, from people interactions. So whether it's a spare bathroom, keeping it somewhere in your garage, maybe somewhere that they can't have access to, that's going to be your best bet until you can get it to a wildlife rehabilitator. Yes, birds are not people as much as we would like to sit them down at the dining table and feed them. It's not exactly the same thing.
They'll be there all day too, so you don't.
Thank you for indulging me in my weird creativity with this. So, all right.
I like birds aren't people again.
You want to do
We
birds
should
aren't
do
people
another
again? All right, you get to pick the amount here. Oh dear, oh dear. No.
We're doing
Okay,
that.
well, apparently we're doing this.
I'm so sorry. Okay, well, yep.
Oh, there it is.
That's all right. All right, well, I gave it away. I guess this is the fun part of technology when I'm using just my finger here. So let's see. All right, well, oh my goodness. Okay.
Well, surprise.
Yeah,
It's another
surprise.
cardinal.
It's another cardinal. And I was hoping this would play automatically, but it doesn't seem to want to. So, okay, well, that is a little northern cardinal. It was video that normally would be us feeding it, but yes, those are the first birds that we tend to get here, I think, in our songbird species. They're early nesters, so they are nesting building their nest between February to April, and then they'll lay in March to April, the little brown speckled eggs, and it takes about 11 to 13 days for incubation and then to fledging. And then they fledge a second brood even by August and September. So they'll have about 2 batches of babies every year. And that's pretty common with most of our species, not just northern cardinals, but also robins and others that are common to hear.
And if you saw it, can I go back to the photo? There?
Yes.
So this
Oh, there we go.
cardinal. Oh, there it's moving.
Okay, well,
Maybe.
it's kind of weird, but that's fine. I don't know what happened.
So you'll notice that this is actually in an incubator. So he has temperature, sport, and humidity. So he can't quite thermoregulate yet, quite naked yet. But you'll notice in the back too, we have a mirror. Anyone guess why? Why would we have a mirror in the single baby?
Yeah.
He's like living other things, so he's like calm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
He's like the only baby.
Yep. So it helps them think that there's another bird with them. So there's a sibling. And it does help limit the risk of imprinting or even vicious.
Fantastic. All right, let's see if I can do this nicely. There we go. Okay, so birds aren't people for
1,000.
1,000. All right. Oh, yes, this is a real call. This was on April 29th. It was, hello, this is the mourning dove fledgling we spoke about. More pictures to come. It's concerning that she hasn't made a single sound since my husband and kids found her on Saturday, April 27th. Are we feeding it enough? What's wrong with this situation? We'll see if you guys picked up anything from the first 2 slides that we talked about. Any ideas? No? Probably shouldn't be feeding them. That's great.
More than 24 hours.
Yep, so we've got 2 days later. Yes? Yep, not feeding it, yep. And then maybe if you're looking at that photo, any thoughts just looking at the condition? I see a hand in the back maybe? No? Too scared? Laura?
Looks like the fledgling.
It is a fledgling. It's a young one.
So she tells them that
Or yeah. Does that bird look like it's in good condition at all? No, it is in very, very poor condition. Depressed, emaciated, lethargic. So not only just the act of feeding it, but if you feed an animal too early before it's even got enough, rehydration or supportive fluids or care to even be able to digest, you could actually kill that animal. And so that's why we really encourage folks not to feed animals or wildlife when they find it. And they're very specific to their dietary needs as well. But good job on the main one, which was the 24-hour regulation. But yes, different bird species, different diets. Mourning doves are actually pretty specific to their dietary needs. They're in the columbiform family. They drink crop milk from their parents, which is made in the crop, and then they drink out of it, basically. It's very, very different than something that you typically give your songbird species. So
How do you replicate that?
we've done different methods over the years. You want to, your experience?
Sure, we use a few different formulations. So there have been folks who have studied diets and how you do a crop replacer. And so we try and follow what the latest up-to-date study is and use that formula. So thankfully, our most current one is a ready-made formula. We can just mix it with water and we're good to go.
We either, generally tube feeding, which is an invasive procedure you never would want to try unless you are a licensed rehabber, because it can very much go wrong. That's our preferred method, although we also have done the more natural method, which is actually allowing them to drink out of something, but it can get quite messy, more messy than it would with their parent. So we've kind of moved more towards the tube feeding because it's a little bit quicker for us, and they seem to do quite well. We even have someone did a printed version of a mourning dove to go on our tube, so they see just a mourning dove coming at them.
Use some puppets and
Yep.
we use mirrors as well for those.
So
And
yeah,
we house them together. We try and we never try and keep singles together. So we'll work with our other rehabilitators to find other orphan singles of the species if we just have a a rare one. So they can replicate it. And we will move them outside it as soon as possible too. Yes.
So when you have the nestlings and you're taking care of those, how
Mhm.
do you, what do you do about teaching them their song?
That is, generally, we try to find adults of the same species that might be vocalizing. That's tough for mourning doves because they are going to be begging and there aren't going to be a lot of mourning doves just deciding to coo. So moving them outside where they might be able to hear those natural sounds of the species native to the property is like our #1 goal. So as soon as they can thermoregulate, we will. We've considered sound machines with bird sounds, but we don't use bird sounds in our sound machines. We just use like rain or a stream bubbling or something, which does help them hear natural sounds indoors. But we don't want to accidentally have them pick up a sound or a song that's not theirs, and or become some sort of weird territorial issue if there was an adult present where it was a different species or a different sex that they would not be happy with, or another of the same sex. So we are very careful not to do that, but moving them outside is honestly the best that we can do. That's a great question. There is a critical period for learning their song for most or all birds. All right, anyone want to pick another one? You want to pick? For 1,000, all right. We should have made this actual donations to Audubon. That would be fun. Is this bird altricial or precocial? It's a tough one. You picked a really hard one. All right, let's do a vote. How many vote for altricial? Precocial? Oh no, a lot of ambivalence. Okay, 50-50 chance. You want to give it away? This is precocial.
Yes.
It sure is. So altricial is when they're helpless. So when they are dependent on their parents for survival. So think of a fledgling robin compared to our precocial species, such most of our waterfowl here. So our Mallard ducklings, or anyone know what the photo here as well?
A baby sandal crane.
Yeah, you got it. No, that's really good birds over here. Yeah, I'm impressed. So these birds, they're immediately standing, walking, ambulating, following that parent around, and already picking up their own food. All right, good job. All right, let's see. Got a whole bunch of other. How are we doing on time? Do we have more time for questions?
It's actually just past 8 o'clock.
Oh, is it really? Okay, let's do one more question and then we'll save the others for maybe another time. So
Hot topics.
hot topics. All right. We're gonna go for the big one or one of these other ones?
Let's go for the big one.
Let's go for the big one. All right. I think someone already mentioned this one. What species is it? Species? It's a bald eagle. Any idea what's wrong with it? It could be avian influenza. This one in particular was actually not during the outbreak period, so could have been that. This one is lead poisoning and some signs and symptoms that we like to talk about, and ones that if you're looking at a bird, it doesn't mean 100%, but as a rehabilitator, when we look at a bird, we can sometimes tell almost, and we will do the diagnostic testing to confirm, but you notice that this bird is swallowing quite frequently. When it gets more towards the end of the video, see how he's doing that? That's a pretty clear sign usually that there's some sort of heavy metal toxicity or some other type of toxicity in general. He's got his head almost upside down fully and he's unable to stand, still visual, but lead toxicity is not fun. And it affects over 20 million animals, more than 130 different species. And honestly, that's probably under guessing because we have tested lead toxicity in anywhere from turtles to blue jays to cranes, loons, eagles, all of our raptor species almost, and many of them having high levels of lead. Question? Do you ever go fishing? Ever heard of lead sinkers? Lead sinkers when you're fishing? Those are still very widely available, and also in a lot of our fish, sometimes if you snag a fish on accident and maybe you had a lead sinker but you weren't able to remove it or something went wrong, that lead is just going to stick around there. And we see especially tackle and lead ingestion from species that would eat that, like a loon or even an eagle. And so, yeah, unfortunately, they will either directly ingest either a lead from hunting, which it is banned in waterfowl hunting, but there is still plenty of lead out there
especially in Wisconsin. And it's still an ammunition option, depending on what kind of gun you're using. Some other clinical signs, though, just like I mentioned, there's lethargy, depression, organ failure. They go into respiratory distress. They start spasming. They can go blind. I think the hardest thing to kind of know about lead toxicity and to see as a rehabilitator is that it affects the entire nervous system over the course of about 3 weeks or 21 days. It slowly shuts the body down, ending with the pain receptors, meaning that they can still feel pain. And that is a really crummy way to pass away in the wild. And as humans, we've unfortunately put that there in the environment. So it's not great for our species that we do obviously revere quite readily, I'd say, like our eagles, but there's many other species that get it too.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we do test majority of the species that come into us. Raptors, we also test things like possums or snapping turtles. We're going to check for lead in almost all of these species that are risky for it, because we'll see low levels on some other species. And anytime we find lead, we're going to treat it so we get that out of the animal system.
It's very hard to get rid of it though, and at the highest levels, it can cause cardiac problems. It could be a long road to that animal not even recovering and have permanent damage in the long run. We've seen eagles, for example, that have had such high levels and even with treatment by the end still can't get up and fly because their heart just can't take the amount of flapping that they possibly can. And that is very, very hard to see knowing that you've tried. So. Yeah.
What information do you have on an eagle die off at some city?
Ooh, I have to think about that one. I'm not sure that I know much about that.
A recent one? A recent?
It's really been going on for a period of time.
Oh, perhaps the Eagle River syndrome.
But yeah, I think that's probably what it is because we've tested and had some positive for that.
Yes, we did. We routinely take blood samples from our eagles that come in and work with researchers who are studying that disease, and we'll send those samples off. And we unfortunately did have a bald eagle that came in this year that the National Wildlife Health Center, the eagle died, the National Wildlife Health Center did do a necropsy and did diagnose that it died from Eagle River syndrome. Yep. So we're actively helping do that research, but they still don't know, a definitive cause, and they're working on it.
It is as far as I know, a form of the Hep C, I think, virus in people, so hepatitis, and it was found by the Goldberg lab at UW-Madison, I believe, after a lot of testing.
There was some hint of hepatitis.
Yes.
Is that what you're understanding?
Yes, it is related in some form or fashion. So yeah, it's kind of unnerving a little bit. So, but I think the origins still are unknown as far as I know. They don't know why or where. Yeah, but we do see it. And actually we've had a couple of cases that have been very suspicious for it, even besides the positive this year. So
they unfortunately have very similar symptoms to lead toxicity and avian
HPAI.
influenza.
It's hard to be a rehabber. It's always like, you guess until you can get enough testing to say definitively what that animal might be sick from. So that's the big goal. We ended on a sad one. That's
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Thanks to all of you for coming and asking such great questions and having great answers for so many
thank
questions.
you.
That's been fabulous. Yeah, thank you guys so much. And yeah, again, they're from the Dane County Humane Society's Wildlife Center. Please check them out on social media and online. They have so many good resources on their website as well if you find an animal.
Yep.
So if you do, that's always a good place to go. And yeah, it's been wonderful to have you guys.
Yeah, thank you everyone for having us. Yeah.